Imagine a kingdom whose walls are strong, whose army is disciplined, and whose people live in peace. From the outside, it appears impossible to conquer. But one night, the enemy doesn't attack the gates. It doesn't break through the walls with force or appear as an obvious enemy. Instead, it quietly walks through an open door that no one thought to guard. By morning, the kingdom still looks the same. The banners still fly above the palace. The soldiers still stand at their posts. Life continues as if nothing has changed. Yet the kingdom is no longer free. It wasn't defeated by an army. It was surrendered from within. For a long time, I believed this story was only about ancient kingdoms. Then I realized it describes something far more familiar. It describes the human mind. Most people spend their lives trying to control the world around them. They work harder, earn more, chase recognition, avoid criticism, and search endlessly for the perfect set of circumstances. They believe that if everything outside finally falls into place, peace will naturally follow. Yet even when life becomes comfortable, the mind often refuses to be. It finds something new to worry about. A conversation that ended yesterday, a mistake made years ago, a future that hasn't arrived, a problem that may never exist. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind can convince you that its stories are true? A friend replies later than usual, and suddenly you begin wondering if you've offended them. Someone looks serious during a meeting, and you quietly assume you've done something wrong. You lie awake at night imagining every possible outcome of tomorrow, even though tomorrow hasn't asked for your attention yet. The strange part is that none of these stories arrive with evidence. They arrive with certainty, and because the voice telling them sounds like your own, you rarely stop to question it. The mind has a remarkable gift. It can imagine, remember, create, and solve problems unlike anything else in nature. It has allowed humanity to build civilizations, write poetry, and explore the stars. But that same gift has another side. It can mistake imagination for reality. It can replay the past until regret feels more real than the present. It can turn uncertainty into fear and possibility into catastrophe. The danger isn't that the mind thinks, the danger is that it never stops. Nearly 2,000 years ago, one man understood this better than most. Marcus Aurelius ruled the greatest empire of his time. Every day he faced decisions that could shape the lives of millions. Wars raged along Rome's frontiers. Disease spread through the empire. Political betrayal was never far away. If anyone had a reason to lose control of his thoughts, it was him. Yet when he wrote in the pages that would later become meditations, he rarely complained about the chaos around him. Instead, he kept returning to the same quiet challenge. Can I govern my own mind as carefully as I try to govern an empire? That question may be even more important today than it was in ancient Rome, because our greatest distractions no longer arrive on horseback. They arrive as notifications, comparisons, endless opinions, and fears about futures that haven't happened. The world has changed dramatically, but the mind responds to uncertainty much as it always has. Marcus gradually discovered something that would become one of the foundations of Stoic philosophy. The first kingdom any person must learn to govern is the one within. Everything else comes after. So before we go any further, I want to leave you with a question, not one to answer immediately, but one to carry with you throughout this journey. Who has been ruling your mind all this time? Has it been wisdom or fear, reason or impulse? Have you been making your thoughts, or have your thoughts been making you? Because the greatest battle of your life will never be fought in the world outside. It will be fought in the silent kingdom within your own mind. And every chapter that follows is about learning how to take back the throne. History tells us that great kingdoms rarely collapsed in a single day. They weakened slowly, not because the walls suddenly disappeared or the army forgot how to fight, but because small cracks were ignored for too long. A trusted advisor became corrupt. A commander grew careless. A ruler stopped paying attention. By the time the enemy appeared at the gates, the kingdom had already begun falling apart from within. The human mind is much the same. People often believe they lose control in dramatic moments, during a crisis, a heartbreak, or a great failure. But in truth, the mind is rarely conquered all at once. It surrenders little by little, through habits so ordinary that they hardly seem worth noticing. It begins the moment you accept every thought as if it were a fact. A single criticism becomes proof that you're not good enough. One mistake convinces you that you'll always fail. A delay becomes rejection. Silence becomes disapproval. Without realizing it, you've handed authority to thoughts that never earned your trust. The Stoics understood something that still surprises people today. The mind doesn't simply record reality like a mirror. It interprets it. Every experience passes through the filter of your judgments, your memories, your fears, and your expectations before it reaches your emotions. Imagine looking through a window covered in dust. You don't notice the dust at first. You simply assume the world outside is dull and unclear. The problem isn't the landscape. It's the glass you're looking through. Our minds often work the same way. Fear darkens the view. Pride distorts it. Anger narrows it. Desire exaggerates it. The world hasn't changed, but the lens has. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea repeatedly in meditations. He reminded himself that events are often far less disturbing than the opinions we attach to them. He knew he couldn't stop difficult things from happening. Wars would still come. Illness would still visit. People would still betray one another. What he could govern was the judgment that followed. That distinction became one of his greatest strengths. Think about how often a single assumption has shaped an entire day. Perhaps a colleague walks past you without saying hello. For the next few hours, your mind quietly writes a story. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? Later, you discover they were simply distracted by a family emergency. Nothing outside had changed, only the story inside your head. Or imagine waiting for the results of an important exam, a job interview, or a medical test. The future is unknown, but your mind refuses to leave the page blank. Instead, it fills every empty space with worst-case scenarios, treating imagination as though it were evidence. By the time reality finally arrives, you've already exhausted yourself fighting battles that never existed. Marcus Aurelius could not have explained this in the language of modern psychology. He knew nothing of cognitive biases or neural pathways. Yet through years of observing his own thoughts, he arrived at a remarkably similar insight. The mind often creates a second world, one made not of facts but of interpretations, and that second world can become more powerful than the first. This is why two people can stand in the same storm and leave with entirely different lives. One sees only destruction, the other sees a challenge to endure. The rain falls equally on both, yet each returns with a different story. The storm is shared. The meaning is chosen. That doesn't mean every painful thought can simply be switched off. Stoicism was never about pretending that fear, grief, or disappointment don't exist. Marcus Aurelius felt all of those things. What made him different was that he refused to let his first impression become his final judgment. He paused, he examined, he questioned. That small pause is where freedom begins. Because the moment you realize that every thought is not a command, you reclaim a piece of your kingdom. You begin to see that the voice in your mind is not always the voice of truth. Sometimes it is only the echo of fear, habit, or yesterday's wounds. And once you understand that, a new question naturally emerges. If our thoughts cannot always be trusted, then who should we trust instead? That is the question Marcus Aurelius spent a lifetime answering, and it is where our journey leads next. Every emperor eventually learns the same lesson. No matter how powerful they become, there are forces they cannot command. Marcus Aurelius could issue orders to thousands of soldiers, but he couldn't command the weather that flooded their camps. He could strengthen Rome's borders, but he couldn't prevent disease from spreading through the empire. He could reward loyal friends, yet he couldn't stop betrayal from finding its way into his court. Power, he discovered, always has limits. The same is true for every one of us. We spend an astonishing amount of our lives trying to control things that have never belonged to us in the first place. We try to control how other people see us, how quickly success should arrive, whether life unfolds according to our plans, and whether the future will be kind. When those things refuse to obey us, we feel frustrated, anxious, or defeated. But perhaps the problem isn't that life is difficult. Perhaps it's that we've been trying to govern the wrong kingdom. Imagine a king who spends every hour worrying about the weather instead of his own people. Every morning he looks to the sky with frustration. If only the rain would stop. If only the wind would change. If only tomorrow were different. Days become months, and months become years. His attention remains fixed on something no ruler has ever controlled. Meanwhile, the roads crumble, the harvest is neglected, and the kingdom quietly weakens, not because of the weather, but because the king abandoned the responsibilities that actually belong to him. How often do we do the same? We wake up worrying about whether people will appreciate us. We replay conversations, hoping we can somehow rewrite words that have already been spoken. We become angry over traffic, disappointed by delays, or consumed by opinions we cannot change. Hour after hour, we invest our energy in battles that were never ours to fight. Marcus Aurelius noticed this pattern in himself, and he challenged it constantly. In Meditations, he reminded himself not to demand that the world unfold according to his wishes, but to meet events with reason and character. He understood that peace wasn't found by controlling life. It was found by controlling his response to life. That sounds simple. Living it is another matter entirely. Suppose you're preparing for an important interview. You can study, you can arrive on time, you can speak honestly and do your best. But you cannot control the interviewer's opinion, the company's internal decisions, or whether another candidate has skills you don't possess. Yet where does the mind usually spend its time? Not on preparation. It races toward outcomes that haven't happened and were never fully ours to decide. Or consider a relationship. You can offer kindness, you can listen carefully, you can be loyal, patient, and truthful. But you cannot force another person to love you, understand you, or remain in your life forever. The moment we confuse influence with control, disappointment becomes almost inevitable. This doesn't mean we should become passive or stop caring. The Stoics never encouraged indifference. Marcus Aurelius still led armies, governed an empire, and worked tirelessly to fulfill his responsibilities. What he refused to do was measure his peace by results he could never guarantee. He focused on effort rather than outcome, character rather than reputation, action rather than applause. That difference changes everything. Imagine an archer standing before a target. He chooses the finest bow. He trains for years. He steadies his breathing. He takes careful aim and releases the arrow with all the skill he possesses. The flight of the arrow is no longer his. A sudden gust of wind may change its course. The target may move unexpectedly. The conditions may shift in ways no one could predict. Should the archer regret practicing? Should he refuse to shoot because success isn't certain? Of course not. His responsibility ends the moment the arrow leaves the string. Life works much the same way. We control how we prepare. We control how honestly we act. We control the integrity we bring to each decision, but we do not control every outcome. The tragedy is that many people spend their lives judging themselves by the flight of the arrow rather than by the quality of the aim. Marcus Aurelius believed that this is where unnecessary suffering begins. When we tie our happiness to outcomes we cannot command, we hand our peace over to chance. But when we root our peace in our own choices, our effort, and our character, something remarkable happens. The world may still surprise us, people may still disappoint us, plans may still fall apart. Yet the center of our lives remains steady because it no longer depends on circumstances beyond our reach. Perhaps this is why Marcus Aurelius returned so often to self-governance. He knew that ruling Rome would one day end. Every emperor eventually leaves the throne. But the way he ruled himself, that was the legacy he carried every single day. And that leads us to another question. If the world outside can never be fully controlled, then what inside us deserves our greatest discipline? Because mastering your mind is not simply about deciding what to ignore. It is about deciding what deserves your attention. And that is where the next lesson begins. Every kingdom has something more valuable than gold. It is not the palace. It is not the army. It is the attention of its ruler. A wise king knows he cannot be everywhere at once. Every day, countless voices compete for his attention. Messengers arrive with rumors. Advisors argue over different plans. Merchants complain about taxes. Generals demand more soldiers. If the king tries to answer every voice, he will soon forget the very purpose of ruling. So he learns an important discipline. Not every message deserves his attention. The same is true of the human mind. From the moment you wake up, your attention is pulled in 100 different directions. A notification lights up your phone. A headline predicts disaster. Someone else's success makes you question your own progress. An old regret suddenly appears without invitation. Before the day has properly begun, your mind has already traveled through the past, the future, and the lives of other people. Meanwhile, the present moment quietly waits to be noticed. Marcus Aurelius didn't live in a world of smartphones or endless news feeds, but he understood something timeless. The mind naturally drifts wherever it is allowed to wander. If left undisciplined, it will chase distractions, amplify fears, and waste precious energy on things that contribute nothing to a life of virtue. That is why meditations often reads like one man gently pulling his own attention back to what truly mattered. Again and again he reminded himself to return. Return to reason. Return to the present. Return to the work in front of him. Think about how easily attention shapes your entire experience. Imagine walking into a beautiful garden. There are flowers in every direction, sunlight filtering through the trees, and birds singing overhead. Yet your eyes immediately notice one patch of dying leaves in the corner. For the next 10 minutes, that's all you can think about. Was the garden ugly? Or did your attention simply choose one small part and mistake it for the whole? Our minds often do exactly that. One criticism outweighs 10 compliments. One mistake overshadows years of progress. One disappointment convinces us that everything is going wrong. Life hasn't become entirely negative. Our attention has simply narrowed until it can no longer see anything else. Marcus Aurelius understood that attention is never neutral. Whatever you repeatedly focus on grows stronger within you. Feed anger, and anger becomes easier to find. Feed resentment, and every new event becomes another reason to resent. Feed fear, and even ordinary moments begin to feel dangerous. But the opposite is also true. When you deliberately return your attention to what is within your control, your mind gradually becomes steadier. Problems don't disappear, but they stop occupying every corner of your inner world. This is why the Stoics treated attention as a form of discipline rather than instinct. They knew the mind would wander. The practice was learning to bring it back, not once, not twice, but every single day. Imagine holding the reins of a powerful horse. If you never guide it, it doesn't stop moving. It simply follows every sound, every movement, every sudden distraction. Before long, you've wandered miles away from where you intended to go. The mind behaves in much the same way. It follows whatever captures its attention. The question is whether you're holding the reins or merely being dragged along. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that a person's life becomes what their thoughts repeatedly dwell upon. He wasn't suggesting that positive thinking could erase hardship. He was pointing towards something far more practical. Your attention is limited. Where you invest it is one of the few choices that truly belongs to you. That means every day, whether consciously or not, you are casting a vote for the person you are becoming. Every moment spent feeding envy strengthens envy. Every moment spent rehearsing fear strengthens fear. Every moment spent returning to reason strengthens reason. Character is not built in extraordinary moments. It is built through thousands of ordinary moments of attention. Perhaps that is why so many people feel mentally exhausted today. Not because they think too much, but because their attention is constantly being claimed by things that never deserved it. The Stoics would ask a simple question whenever the mind became restless. Is this worthy of my attention? It sounds almost too simple. Yet that single question has the power to interrupt anger before it grows, to soften anxiety before it takes control, and to separate what truly matters from what merely demands our notice. Because the mind doesn't become your master in one dramatic moment. It happens one distraction, one assumption, one unnecessary worry at a time. And if attention is the doorway through which those things enter, then the next lesson is about learning who should be allowed to stand at that door. Because not every thought deserves an audience, and not every voice deserves to become your truth. Imagine a traveler walking through an unfamiliar city. As he makes his way through the crowded streets, strangers approach him from every direction. Some offer helpful advice. Others try to sell him things he doesn't need. A few intentionally mislead him, hoping he'll lose his way. A wise traveler doesn't believe every stranger he meets. He listens, he observes. Then he decides who deserves his trust. Yet when it comes to our own minds, we often do the exact opposite. A thought appears, and we immediately treat it as the truth. I'm going to fail. Nobody respects me. I'm too late. I'll never change. The thought arrives, and without questioning it, we allow it to become part of our identity. But have you ever stopped to wonder where these thoughts actually come from? Did you consciously choose every fear you've ever had? Did you deliberately decide which memories would return while you were trying to fall asleep? Did you wake up one morning and think, today, I'd like to spend the next 3 hours worrying about something that probably won't happen? Of course not. Thoughts often appear before we invite them. Marcus Aurelius understood this through years of observing his own mind. He noticed that the first impression is often automatic. Fear arrives without permission. Anger rises before reason has a chance to speak. Pride whispers that we deserve more. Desire insists that happiness lies just beyond the next achievement. He never blamed himself for the arrival of these impressions. He judged himself by what happened next. That distinction is easy to overlook, but it changes everything. Imagine you're standing beside a river. Leaves drift past on the current from sunrise until sunset. Some are green, some are dry and broken. Some move quickly, while others circle in slow eddies before continuing downstream. You don't jump into the river to catch every leaf. You simply watch them pass. The Stoics believed our thoughts should be treated in much the same way. Not every thought deserves to be grabbed. Not every emotion deserves to become an action. Not every impulse deserves obedience. Freedom begins when you realize that the appearance of a thought is not the same as your agreement with it. Modern life makes this lesson even more difficult. Every day we're encouraged to react immediately. Someone posts an opinion online, and we're expected to answer. An email arrives, and we feel pressured to respond before we've even had time to think. A rumor spreads, and within minutes, people have formed absolute conclusions. Speed has become a habit. Reflection has become a rarity. Marcus Aurelius practiced the opposite. When something disturbed him, he tried to pause before assigning meaning to it. He reminded himself that the event itself had no power over his character unless he chose to surrender that power. Yet within those few seconds lies the difference between wisdom and regret. Think about the last argument you had. How much of it was caused by the situation itself? And how much was caused by the first interpretation your mind created? Perhaps someone interrupted you. Your mind immediately translated that into disrespect. Perhaps a friend canceled plans. Your mind called it rejection. Perhaps someone offered criticism. Your mind heard humiliation instead of guidance. The event happened only once. But the story kept unfolding long afterward because the mind continued adding new chapters. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that we have the ability to examine our judgments before accepting them. That simple habit allowed him to create a small distance between what happened and how he chose to respond. Within that distance, emotions no longer ruled him. Reason quietly returned. This is not about becoming emotionless. Stoicism has often been misunderstood in that way. Marcus Aurelius was not made of stone. He experienced grief when loved ones died. He felt frustration during war. He carried the weight of impossible decisions every day. His strength came from refusing to let his first reaction become his final decision. That is a skill every one of us can practice. The next time fear tells you that failure is certain, pause. The next time anger insists that revenge will bring peace, pause. The next time your inner voice tells you that you are not enough, pause. Not because the thought will instantly disappear, but because you are reminding yourself of something profoundly important. A thought has entered your mind. It has not become your master. Perhaps this is the greatest freedom Marcus Aurelius ever discovered. Between the voice that speaks and the person who listens, there is still a choice. And the quality of that choice shapes the quality of an entire life. Because once you stop believing every thought that enters your mind, you begin asking a different question. If I don't have to obey every thought, then what should I choose to follow instead? That question leads us to the heart of Stoic discipline. Not the discipline of controlling the world, but the discipline of shaping your own character. Imagine a ship crossing the Mediterranean Sea. The waves rise without warning. Winds shift direction. Dark clouds gather where the sky had been clear only moments before. The captain cannot command the sea to become calm, nor can he bargain with the storm to spare his journey. Yet despite the uncertainty around him, he possesses something the storm does not: a compass. As long as that compass remains true, he can lose sight of the shoreline without losing his direction. Human life is not so different. There will always be storms you didn't choose. Some arrive as failure, others as illness, disappointment, loss, or unexpected change. You cannot prevent every storm from entering your life, but you can decide what guides you while you're moving through it. Many people choose unstable guides. Some follow comfort, avoiding every difficult conversation and every uncomfortable decision. Others follow approval, allowing the opinions of strangers to determine their self-worth. Some spend years chasing success, believing that one more achievement will finally quiet the restlessness within them. The problem is that all of these guides change with circumstances. Comfort disappears, praise fades, success comes and goes. If your direction depends on things that constantly move, your life will always feel uncertain. Marcus Aurelius searched for something steadier. He found it in character. Again and again, the pages of Meditations return to the same quiet reminder. Your character belongs to you. Your honesty, your courage, your patience, your self-control. These are treasures no critic can take from you and no applause can increase. That didn't mean Marcus always succeeded. He wasn't writing because he had mastered himself. He was writing because, like everyone else, he needed constant reminders. His journal wasn't a record of perfection. It was evidence of practice. There is something deeply human about that. The ruler of the most powerful empire in the world still needed to tell himself day after day to be patient, to remain fair, to avoid arrogance, to meet frustration with reason instead of impulse. He understood that titles do not build character. Repeated choices do. Think of a sculptor standing before a block of marble. He doesn't create the statue with one powerful strike of the hammer. Every careful tap removes a small piece of stone. At first, nothing remarkable seems to happen. Days pass, and the marble still looks almost unchanged. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, a figure begins to emerge. Character is shaped in much the same way. It isn't built by one heroic decision. It's built by hundreds of ordinary ones. The moment you choose honesty when lying would be easier. The moment you remain calm when anger feels justified. The moment you admit you're wrong instead of protecting your pride. These moments rarely attract attention. No audience applauds them. No headlines are written about them. But they are the quiet blows of the sculptor's hammer, slowly revealing the person you are becoming. Marcus Aurelius understood that every choice leaves a mark on the mind. Each time we surrender to anger, impatience becomes a little easier the next time. Each time we choose reason over impulse, self-control grows a little stronger. In this way, we are always training ourselves, whether we realize it or not. The question is never whether you're shaping your character. The question is what kind of character you're shaping. This is why Stoicism places such importance on the present moment. Not because the future doesn't matter, but because character can only be formed in the decisions you make today. Tomorrow is shaped by today's habits. A lifetime is shaped by today's choices. An empire Marcus Aurelius knew could be inherited. Character could not. It had to be earned again each morning. Perhaps that's why his writings still resonate after nearly 2,000 years. They aren't the reflections of a man trying to appear wise. They are the private notes of someone trying, every single day, to become a little wiser than he was yesterday. There is a quiet humility in that, and there is freedom in it as well. Because once your life is guided by character instead of circumstance, something remarkable happens. Success no longer makes you arrogant. Failure no longer defines you. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't destroy you. The world continues to change, but your direction remains steady. Like the captain who trusts his compass more than the wind. You stop asking life to become easier and begin asking yourself a better question. In this moment, what kind of person do I choose to be? Marcus Aurelius believed that this question mattered more than any prediction about the future, not because it guaranteed an easy life, but because it guaranteed that no matter what life brought, you would never lose the one thing that truly belonged to you, your character. And once your character becomes your compass, the final step is learning how to strengthen it, not once in a while, but every single day. That is where the Stoics believed real mastery begins. No one becomes wise because they read a single book. No athlete becomes strong because they exercise once. No musician masters an instrument by practicing only when inspiration appears. The mind is no different. Marcus Aurelius understood that peace was not something he could discover once and keep forever. Every sunrise brought new frustrations, new temptations, and new opportunities to lose himself. That is why Meditations was never written as a book for other people. It was a conversation with himself, a daily return to the principles he knew were easy to forget. There is something reassuring about that. Even an emperor needed reminders, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he was human. Imagine beginning each morning before the noise of the world reaches you, before the messages, before the headlines, before the opinions of everyone else begin competing for your attention. For a few quiet moments, you ask yourself a simple question. What kind of person do I want to be today? Not, what do I hope happens? Not, will today be easy? Only, how do I want to meet whatever this day brings? That small shift changes the entire direction of the day. Instead of waiting for circumstances to decide your mood, you begin by deciding your principles. Marcus often reminded himself that difficult people would cross his path. Some would be selfish, impatient, dishonest, or ungrateful. He wasn't trying to become cynical. He was preparing his mind so that surprise wouldn't become frustration. When we expect life to be perfectly fair, every disappointment feels personal. When we accept that difficulty is part of life, we meet it with greater steadiness. This wasn't pessimism. It was preparation. Another practice was learning to pause before responding. Think about how many regrets begin with the phrase, "I reacted without thinking." A harsh email sent in anger, words spoken during an argument that can never be taken back, a decision made in fear instead of reason. Marcus knew that the first impulse is rarely the wisest guide. So he trained himself to create a small space between the event and his response. Within that space, anger loses some of its force. Fear becomes easier to examine. Pride becomes easier to recognize. That pause may last only a few seconds, but those few seconds can change the course of an entire relationship, or even a life. As evening arrived, his work wasn't finished. Many historians believe Marcus often reflected on the day before returning to sleep. He would look back not to punish himself for every mistake, but to learn from them. Where had he lost his patience? Where had he acted with courage? Where had emotion spoken louder than reason? The purpose was never guilt. The purpose was growth. Imagine a craftsman who spends years building a masterpiece. At the end of each day, he steps back to study his work. He notices what needs refining, what has improved, and where tomorrow's effort should begin. He doesn't destroy the sculpture because it isn't finished. He returns the next morning and continues carving. Perhaps we should treat our own character with the same patience. Too many people expect immediate transformation. They become discouraged because they still overthink, still lose their temper, or still fall into old habits. They mistake slow progress for failure. The Stoics saw it differently. Every moment of awareness was progress. Every time you noticed your mind wandering and gently brought it back, you strengthened your discipline. Every time you questioned a fearful thought instead of obeying it, you reclaimed a little more of your freedom. Every time you chose integrity over convenience, you shaped your character. These moments may seem small, yet a life is built from small moments repeated consistently. Marcus Aurelius never promised that the mind would stop producing fear, anger, or doubt. He knew those visitors would continue to knock at the door. His practice was learning not to invite every visitor inside. Some thoughts deserved reflection. Others deserved to be acknowledged and allowed to pass. That quiet discernment became one of his greatest strengths, and perhaps it can become one of ours, because mastering the mind is not about winning one great battle. It is about returning day after day to the same simple disciplines with humility and patience, not striving for perfection, striving for progress, not asking, "Have I mastered my mind?" but asking, "Did I govern it a little better today than I did yesterday?" That question is enough, for it reminds us that mastery is not a destination waiting somewhere in the future. It is a way of walking through each ordinary day, and when enough ordinary days are lived with intention, they quietly become an extraordinary life. Which brings us to the final lesson Marcus Aurelius leaves behind. Not about controlling the future, but about discovering what true freedom has meant all along. Imagine an old emperor at the end of his life. The battles have been fought. The victories that once filled the streets with celebration have faded into memory. The voices that praised him have grown silent. The people who feared him, admired him, or opposed him have all become part of history. The empire he spent decades protecting will one day belong to someone else. Power changes hands, wealth changes hands. Even great civilizations eventually become stories told by future generations. There is only one question that remains. Who did you become while all of it was happening? That is the question Marcus Aurelius quietly wrestled with throughout his life. When we look back at history, it's easy to remember him as an emperor. Yet the pages of Meditations reveal something far more interesting. They reveal a man who understood that governing Rome was only part of his responsibility. The harder task, the one no title or army could accomplish for him, was learning to govern himself. Perhaps that is why his words still speak to us after nearly 2,000 years. The world has changed beyond anything he could have imagined. We no longer travel Roman roads or gather in marble forums. We carry the world in our pockets. News reaches us in seconds. Opinions arrive faster than we can process them. Every day, our attention is pulled in countless directions. Yet the greatest struggle remains exactly the same. The struggle between reacting and reflecting, between impulse and reason, between becoming a servant to the mind or its master. Throughout this journey, we've explored an idea that is both simple and demanding. Your mind tells stories. Some are true, some are shaped by fear, some are written by old memories that refuse to let go. Some are born from pride, insecurity, or the quiet desire to control what has never been ours to control. Wisdom begins when you stop believing that every story deserves your trust. That doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. There will still be days when anxiety arrives before sunrise. Days when criticism stings more than you'd like to admit. Days when anger feels justified or doubt whispers that you're not enough. Marcus Aurelius experienced those moments too. Stoicism was never a promise that difficult thoughts would disappear. It was an invitation to meet them differently, to pause before reacting, to examine before believing, to let character speak before emotion makes the final decision. If there is one lesson that ties everything together, perhaps it is this. The quality of your life is shaped less by what happens to you and more by the relationship you build with your own mind. That relationship is not transformed in one dramatic moment. It changes quietly, one thoughtful decision at a time, one restrained reaction at a time, one honest reflection at a time. Just as a kingdom is strengthened by countless small acts of wise leadership, the mind is strengthened through countless ordinary choices that no one else may ever see. And perhaps that is where true freedom has been hiding all along, not in escaping hardship. Not in convincing the world to behave as you wish, not in waiting for perfect circumstances, but in discovering that there is one place where you can always begin, within yourself. The throne you've been searching for was never somewhere beyond the horizon. It was never hidden in wealth, success, or the approval of other people. It has always been waiting inside your own mind. The question has never been whether you possess that throne. The question is whether you've chosen to sit upon it. So, the next time fear begins writing tomorrow's story before tomorrow arrives, pause. The next time anger asks you to surrender your peace, pause. The next time your mind insists that one failure defines your future, pause. Remember that you are more than the first thought that enters your mind. You are the one who decides what happens next. Marcus Aurelius once spent his evenings writing quiet reminders to himself, not because he expected perfection, but because he understood that wisdom is something we return to again and again. Perhaps that's the invitation his life still offers us today. Not to become fearless, not to become emotionless, but to become more awake, more deliberate, more faithful to the person we hope to become. Because the world will always ask for your attention. It will offer distractions, fears, ambitions, and endless reasons to lose yourself. Guard your attention, guard your character, guard your peace. For in the end, the greatest victory is not winning a battle against the world. It is refusing to lose yourself within it. Thank you for spending these moments with us. If this reflection gave you a new way to look at your own mind, let it be more than something you simply listen to. Carry one idea from this video into your day and quietly put it into practice. Philosophy has never been about collecting wise words. It has always been about living them. If you enjoy thoughtful explorations of Stoicism, history, and timeless ideas that help us navigate the modern world, consider subscribing to Ancient Minds. And before you leave, I'd love to hear from you. Which thought has ruled your mind for the longest? And after today's journey, what is one small step you'll take to reclaim the throne? Until next time, take care of your mind, because it is the only kingdom you will rule for your entire life.